Once upon a time, in a land far away, a traveler entered a village in the cold of late autumn. The doors were shut. The village was in a land that had experienced a poor harvest. No one walked the streets, and sound seemed absent. Yet as the traveler walked through the place, he noticed curtains parting and muffled sounds of children behind closed doors. The traveler was not too well off himself. He had on ragged clothes, a bag on his back, and over the bag, a big pot. Okay, it was a cauldron. The traveler went from house to house in the village. He knocked on door after door asking for something to eat because he was hungry. At every home he heard the same answer. We are starving too. We don't have anything to share. Go away. Maybe the next village can feed you. However, the traveler did not leave. He sat down on a bench in the middle of the village and whistled a happy tune. Folks looked out their windows. At the traveler, they thought to themselves, he was told to leave. Why is he still here? They even noticed each other looking through their curtains. The traveler set down the cauldron from his back, and he went to the village well and filled the cauldron half the way up with water. Then he collected branches and leaves. It was autumn, so there were many dry leaves about and sticks. The traveler gathered them in the center of the town square and placed the cauldron upon them and started a fire slowly with his flint and steel from his pack. It took a bit of time to do this. Even those experienced with making fires know that the fire does take a while for the flame to catch. As he worked in the fire, people no longer stood at the windows behind curtains, but many opened their doors instead to get a better view of the traveler. Children stood there watching too, standing next to their parents. When the water came to a boil, the traveler took out 3 smooth rocks from his pocket and held them in his hand. He wiped them off with a rag. The traveler took a stone in his right hand and held it up high enough for all to see, and he tossed it into the cauldron. He proceeded to do the same thing with the other 2 stones. Plop, plop, plop. Each stone fell into the boiling water. Finally, overcome by curiosity, a woman left her doorway and approached the traveler. "What are you doing?" she asked the traveler. And in a loud voice, the traveler said, "I'm making stone soup." The woman could not believe her eyes. "A soup from stones?" she asked. "Yes," said the traveler, "it's quite delicious, although it would be a bit tastier with salt and herbs." "Oh," said the woman, "I may have some salt and herbs in my kitchen." As the woman added herbs and salt to the pot, the door of her neighbor's house opened. A man and his young son came out. "What are you doing?" asked the son. "We're making stone soup," answered the traveler. "A soup from stones?" said the father. "Yes," replied the traveler. "It is quite delicious, although you can be better with a few vegetables." "Daddy," said the son, "I think we have some potatoes and carrots under the stairs." The man and his son went back into their home and brought out carrots and potatoes and added them to the pot. The traveler, of course, first cut them into smaller pieces. The smell of the stone soup lifted into the air. A window opened and an elderly woman called down to her neighbors. "What are you doing there?" "We're making stone soup," they replied. A soup from stones?" asked the elderly woman. "Yes," said the traveler, "it is quite delicious, although it would be a bit tastier with a little tofu." I'm giving the story, you're going to have tofu. You don't say, said the elderly woman. Well, I happen to have some tofu. One by one, the villagers opened their doors. Each brought a little something to add to the stone soup. They brought chopped cabbage, onions, and celery, and garlic. Someone even had boiled eggs to place on the table. Tables and chairs were brought out, and they were set with bowls, cutlery, and mugs. When the pot was full, villagers offered bread and other goodies. One villager even shared his homemade apple cider. The traveler exclaimed, "This will be a meal fit for a king." The villagers and the travelers sat together and enjoyed a delicious meal made from the stones. They told stories, and the elders reminisced about past days in the village. They even mentioned that the village had been different in the olden days, and they were more supportive. Their tummies full of food and their hearts full of joy, they declared to one another, "Who could have imagined such a meal? The stones must be magic." The traveler answered, "No, no. There is no magic in these stones. Each of us shared just a little, and together we have made a feast." When the meal was over and all the dishes were done, the traveler filled his knapsack with the flint and steel and collected his pot and the stones. At dawn, the traveler continued on his way. The villagers waved and shouted their thanks until he was out of sight. "What shall we eat today?" they asked one another. A child held up a stone and said, "I have an idea. Let's make stone soup." You've probably heard this story before, but probably never with tofu. The villagers came together to share what they had. They worked together and discovered that working together yielded more than any one household could have by itself. They found that sharing what they had meant more for everyone. In doing so, they learned to be generous, to trust that each would make it through the hard times by sharing. They also learned to believe in their community, to be generous to one another. Generosity is a virtue that is something they had to relearn. As the elders told the stories, they realized that at one time they had been generous to each other. The village was more interdependent once upon a time than it was at the beginning of the story. They just needed to be reminded of the spirit that had sustained them in times past. They began to trust each other and to believe that their community, their village, could survive if only they worked toward their shared interests. This meant that they needed to risk their own security to make secure their shared life. They needed to stand together and support one another in their moment of fear. In all that time that I have been alive, I never believed more powerfully that Unitarian Universalism was needed more than now. That story is an illustration of what happens with community when it shares. We believe in and affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We affirm and promote justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. We affirm and promote acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth. We affirm and promote a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We affirm and promote the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process in our congregations and in society at large. We affirm and promote the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. We affirm and promote respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are part. In this congregation, as with many others, we also join in affirming and promoting journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse and multicultural beloved community, by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other repressions in ourselves and our institutions. These are the commitments that we make to ourselves and to the human community and the natural world, as a matter of fact. They are not to be taken lightly. They represent ideals held among us that often put us at odds with the flow of American culture. These principles of our religious heritage call us to be an agency of conscience. They call us to be together in theologically diverse spiritual community. They call us to remember who we are as a church and to speak through words and actions that to each other and the larger world. This congregation is unique in the Lehigh Valley. This is a religious community that acknowledges many different spiritual paths. This is a religious community that believes in freedom explicitly. This is a church in which you can hear ideas and thoughts that would not be able to be spoken anywhere else. As John Wolfe, who earlier we quoted from in our responsive reading, said, further in that same sermon from which that was taken, he said, "You want to support a Unitarian Universalist congregation because it has a free pulpit, because you can hear ideas expressed there which would cost any other minister his or her job." In church years past, in this congregation, I have spoken uncritically about atheism, inclusion, bisexuality, Native American spirituality and thought, blasphemy, transgender rights, Buddhism, Taoism, gay people in the Unitarian Universalist ministry, spiritual lessons from popular culture, brave women, Christian and Jewish faith, and the calling to social justice, among many, many topics. In no other religious tradition in this country, other than this one, could a variety of subjects be examined by a clergy person without dismay or controversy in the congregation. We are a unique form of spiritual community. And a Unitarian Universalist church has a calling. We see what is happening. Human rights, legal rights are being subverted. American citizens of color are being arrested and detained without legal counsel or being charged just because they're not of mostly European ancestry. We see it. Institutions are being intimidated by the government to deny the existence of people of color or transgender folks, or minimize the contributions of people who are not white men. Our nation just invaded another country. We see it. During these frightening times, Unitarian Universalism needs to be a movement that preserves the ideals of our principles and holds up the values of hope and compassion. We need this congregation to guide us through these times, to remind us of human possibility and goodness and reason. We need this congregation and others to keep the light going, lest the darkness overtake our world. Be with us and know hope. Be with us and know love. Be with us and know that you are not alone. We are in this together. We can fill the cauldron with spiritual nourishment. We can support each other in the triumphs and crises of life. We share a faith in humanity. Be with us, and we will continue to speak to that which is important and worthy. Right now, the Lehigh Valley needs this congregation. People need to hear the call of hope and love. People need to be spiritually fed in many different ways. Now more than ever, people need to hear what our Unitarian Universalist faith proclaims in our principles. Now more than ever, people need to hear the hope that can be spoken here. In this frightening world, our voice needs to resound, encouraging courage and faith. And so I ask you to give to this congregation because you know that your life is strengthened by its presence. You know that the principles of Unitarian Universalism are still a statement of our shared belief and vision for humanity. You are here because this congregation is sustained here. In final reflection, I have been with you for about 3.5 years. During that time, about 4 members who had not attended this church regularly for quite some time died and left money to the congregation in their wills. I spoke with family members of a couple of those who left money. The family members told me that their parent left money to this church because the community's faith through social interaction, mutual support, worship, music, and actions of public witness. They told me that their parents felt a sense of spiritual belonging and took encouragement from this congregation's ideals. You may not always know this, because in some ways this congregation focuses on some things that are difficult rather than the things that it does right and things that it is living and loving. The Unitarian Universalist Church of the Lehigh Valley has weathered many storms and is still a spiritual community that provides meaning and changes lives. Maybe you didn't know that. This church changes lives. It's changed the lives of many of you in this room. In closing this morning, I want to share with you these words by my colleague in ministry, Bill Neely, from a stewardship sermon that he gave, and it seems to be very fitting. Stewardship in the life of a congregation is about building the church that proclaims this new way of being and practices it every day. And each gift of every level better equips us to serve more people with our faith. In stewardship, the money that we pledge is really about the hope that we will build and the compassion that we will share and the love that will sound into a world polluted by far too many words of hatred. Now more than ever is the time for our congregations and larger faith's message and ministries in the world. Now is the time for our liberal religious voice to sound over all borders and across all lands. Now, when messages unlike ours dominate the airwaves, is the time for our gospel to be proclaimed from the mountaintops and the valley depths. So be it. Blessed be. Amen.